Hey, that's pretty good. The Raptors defeat the Chicago Bulls 113-104. Sans, Pascal Siakam, and Kem Birch. For those people who are paying attention, Fred VanVleet comes back into the lineup with a monster game. Scotty Barnes, pretty good. OG Anunoby, scintillating. Christian Koloko setting early career records for himself. The defense, it found its footing in this one. Raptors Reaction Podcast. I'm your host, Samson Folk. What a game in this one. If you were somebody who was, prior to this game saying Fred doesn't fit the vision, Fred plays too dissimilarly and his strengths lie in places that aren't important to this roster. They've already surpassed the small guard, whatever. Well, this game is probably not one that fits into your ideals on the game of basketball, unfortunately for you. But for the team, they got back Fred VanVleet. Pascal Siakam, the all-NBA player, leaves the lineup. Fred VanVleet, the all-star player, comes back into it. And so that was a major help. Scotty Barnes struggled through much of the game. He's the lead ball handler. Fred had a lot of possessions as well, of course. Quite a few good ones out of the pick and roll that it was really nice to see. His first pop this year playing out of that play type. But Scotty trying to find his way as the guy who's on ball a lot, trying to make sure he can make his reads, trying to get the guys in their spots, trying to get to his own. It's a lot to handle, and he struggled at it. But there were those moments he'd find it during runs. He really did find something, and a lot of it came down to a similar way to operate to Pascal Siakam, albeit not as good yet. He's a young guy. He's on his ascension to a star, not quite there, but having some of those screening actions just so he could get that empty side post up, post entry pass so that he can take Alex Caruso off the dribble. That stuff is really nice. You can just transition out of if he's having trouble getting or breaking down, coming off a screen or anything like that. So that was nice to see. I enjoyed that. But most of all in this game, I probably enjoyed Christian Koloko, OG Anunoby, and Fred VanVleet. Fred, because I think he found the right mark in this one. Defensively, he was pretty damn good. I'll talk about the Raptors defense as a whole in a bit, but Fred defensively pretty damn good. Offensively, he was obviously fantastic. The Raptors in this one, they were they were left wanting in the half court. I think that's objective. They ended up scoring pretty well in this game because of transition, but in the half court, they had a tough time. Fred giving you 30 points, 11 assists, 5 made threes, got to the line for 7 free throws. That's a really big deal because we haven't been getting that from Fred, prior to this game, early on in this season. And to get that out of Fred, like 30 and 11 is no small thing, especially when it's paired with good defense. In a game they won by 9, he was a plus 27. Whoever shared the minutes with Fred, you won your minutes. Good for you. So guys like, Precious Achua at minus 20 did not have a ton of overlap with Fred, for example. Gary Trent Jr. had some overlap with Fred. That was at the start of the game, but not that much later, minus 25. And neither Precious nor Gary had their best games, but the what is it, like a close to a 40-point swing between the or 50-point swing, I should say, between plus 27 and minus 25 in Gary Trent's in his situation, I should say. That's a big swing. My God, though. Okay, let's focus in on Fred. The playmaking out of the pick and roll I thought was really inspired. He was taking that extra dribble to bring a guy a little bit farther, then finding the roller down the seam. He had, I think, 3 or 4 that were converted tonight. This is what I talked about kind of in my piece and what I talked about over the course of, in the reaction pod as well, as that while Pascal Siakam is by far the best creator on the Raptors, he doesn't create in all the ways. He's comfortable more than anything, kind of drawing a double, finding where that double is coming from, breaking it down from there. But as far as having Christian Koloko, Pascal is not going to get downhill and throw him a lob. Even though they share the court, even though there's some screening actions, he's not really going to throw a ball into contested airspace when he feels like he can create and bring a guy from the bottom and then get a dump off for a layup or something. Fred in this game was willing to see Koloko hitting that seam, toss it up there. Not every single one went well. Some of them contested, some of them Koloko wasn't able to convert on. Some got fouled, he went to the line, some he finished, both from Scotty and from Fred, but it introduces a new dynamic to the offense. And so Koloko really went and got after it. Fred, not just to Koloko either, but a couple really nice plays to Scotty as well as a roller in this one, and finding cutters as well. And then on top of that, Fred just on time, on target with end of quarter stuff, getting to his pull ups, hitting shots late in the game, catch and shoot, pull up stuff, just keeping the Bulls at bay when the Bulls had their run and made some shots. It was Fred who was always there. And towards the end of the game, once the Raptors really pulled away, it was the turnovers, getting out in transition and stuff like that. But the half court stuff, Fred, he put on the cape tonight. He was absolutely tremendous. And this is the blueprint, by the way. I wrote that piece after the Dallas game saying like, "Hey, here's how the Raptors can win without Pascal." And I said Fred is going to have some of that pull-up juice. Scotty is going to have to create in ways that we haven't typically seen. He's going to have to add a bit of a new element because he can't replace what Pascal does. And OG will have to create as well. OG with the laydowns, OG with the catch and shoot threes with a bit of creation, especially, creating for himself as a transition guy. He continues to do so. And the offensive rebounding. The Raptors, as it just so happens in this game, they had the transition they needed. They had Fred's pull up, and they rebounded about 42% of their own misses over the course of the game. That is incredibly important. I'm not sure what the numbers are at the end of the game. 23 offensive rebounds. That's a lot. That's 23 extra possessions in a game that was decided by 9 points. This is what they have to do. Precious had 3 of them. Thad had 4. I mean, Boucher had 6. Like, these guys coming off the bench and supplementing the starters, this is one of the big ways that they make waves and they win minutes. Not Precious in this game, obviously. Even Boucher in this game was a -6. Porter was a -4. These guys were minuses, but they played good games. It's just the Raptors on the other end, and this is where I guess we'll talk about the defense. The Raptors, they were susceptible to runs in this game, and that's basically it relies on a couple things, and it's mostly due to the Raptors doing a really good job of putting the game in the palm of the hands of the Bulls role players. We talked to Nick before the game, and he was talking about how difficult it was going to be to contain DeMar. And even after the game was talking about like, hey, yeah, it took a lot, but the Raptors trapped DeMar early offense. They wanted the ball out of his hands, and they put the ball into DeSumo, to Vucevic, to Patrick Williams, and Caruso, and that wasn't necessarily successful. The game over, like 104 is not anything to write home about. The 33 points in the third quarter, yes, that was a big deal, but it was basically just swing passes and threes. Like Caruso is not usually a guy who's going to give you 11 assists. In fact, he's usually giving you about 4 per game. Why he was up so high is because he, following, DeMar up the court, they're both sitting above the break when you're establishing that offensive set. And where does the pass go? Right to Caruso. It's the first pass away. DeMar lobs it over. Caruso is immediately, he's in that 4-on-3 scenario. It's up to him to penetrate. It's up to him to find a guy, collapse the defense even further or finish yourself. And Caruso, I think, wasn't aggressive enough at all. And the Bulls largely in this game got their points by way of Caruso kind of operating as the connector. And just because they got their points this way doesn't mean this was successful, doesn't mean this is what they wanted to do. But Caruso making decisions in advantage situations was not good. It just wasn't up to snuff. And outside of that is, DeMar kind of spying the double coming, the blitz trap, whatever, coming a little bit early and making a skip pass or something like that. And even outside of that is Caruso sometimes being, a step ahead of the defense, seeing where they're going to rotate from in that 4-on-3 scenario, picking out the guy who's zoning up. Maybe he gets them to cheat. Maybe you pass out for a 3. Maybe they make that quick zip pass inside, finish for a layup. But 104 points is, again, the Raptors defense in this one was great. And this leads us to, not only was OG and the guys at the point of attack really impressive, great, I think, opportunistic trapping in this game, pretty good rotation on the back end as well. I was happy with it. It wouldn't have been nearly as good if the shooting was better from the Bulls or if they would have been a little bit more aggressive off the bounce. If Zach LaVine, for example, was in this game, this doesn't fly whatsoever, but he wasn't. The game plan reflected that, and the Raptors won because of it. And this is where Koloko enters in. So clear out space. Let's do the Koloko conversation. So Koloko, 11 points, 7 boards, 2 assists, 6 blocks. The assist, by the way, pretty good. The Raptors, they have a play called Horns Chin Punch. Typically, they run it to create kind of a pick and roll action as the secondary, the counter. But the first one is they want to create like a wide open cut to the rim for usually OG, Pascal, or Scotty. And if that you switch the screen at the chin action part of it, then typically you'll get an advantaged post up, a mismatch. They usually run that, but they ran OG in an Iverson cut over top of it, which created, he came off the elbow and went backdoor for he wasn't the guy who usually goes backdoor. This was a wrinkle they threw on top of it, which they usually don't, and it led to a dunk. And Koloko was the trigger man, so that was cool. But outside of that, it's the blocks, right? We're all here. We want to talk about that defense. Koloko, for the most part, I've said on this podcast, everybody knows that I've been kind of about that pick and roll defense. We saw the warts of it against, uh, very much so against the Mavericks. The Raptors trapping tonight means that they're funneling the ball. They're not stopping the ball. They're funneling it because you don't expect to stop the ball in traps. You expect to move the ball elsewhere. They're funneling it to other places. That means you get guys like Patrick Williams. That means you get guys like Caruso, Dalen Terry, Javonte Green, Dragic. Even to Dragic had a really good game, by the way. Derek Jones Jr. All these guys who are taking a few too many dribbles, putting the ball on the floor for a little too much, and losing themselves amid the rotations, beating their guy, thinking they're there. And if there's one standalone skill that Koloko has not shown that he's not only just good at, but he's very, very good at, is contesting shots at the rim. The Bulls shot extremely bad at the rim for what it's worth tonight. Let me check the numbers on that. So the Bulls took 45% of their shots at the rim tonight. They hit 47 of them. Cleaning the Glass has that at the 3rd percentile, and you would be crazy to exclude Koloko from that. That is a huge impact from Christian Koloko because he erased 6 by himself, and he changed a few more. His timing for weak side rotations, that help side stuff, has been really good. That's been the strongest aspect of his game, and that is weaponized further defensively because he's tall. He has a really high standing reach and a really long wingspan. And he's like that athleticism has been quite functional. He steps with the guys, matches, meets them in air. And whether he's contesting with that straight up tip block or he's swatting something, he's there. And I thought tonight at the back end of that trapping scheme, and he did trap a couple times and even got back, trapped at the point of attack. And then the ball kind of worked its way around. There was a guy with a driving lane. I think it was Pat Will, and he came back and blocked it. That's really great ground coverage. That's really nice to see. And on top of that, when the Raptors were trapping elsewhere and he was left back at the rim, I think he was a really, really strong last line of defense. Given how the Raptors played this game, given how limited the supporting cast of the Bulls was in this one, this was a really great game for Koloko to kind of show his stuff, and he did. Like it's not like yes, it was a good matchup. That doesn't mean it was easy for him. He played exceptionally well. If you're a Koloko fan, if you're a Raptors fan, you should be proud of what he did. Of course, he was very impressive. By far the best game he's played, and he also converted on some lobs too on the other end. So that was largely, by the way, that was the defense that made the Raptors go in this one. Is that trapping? I've talked about it, piecemeal throughout this podcast, so you probably have an idea of what they did. But yes, trap, funnel the ball elsewhere, rotate, keep rotating from the weak side. Yes, you're susceptible to the skip passes, but you're going to put these secondary, tertiary players in, I would say, positions that they typically aren't in. They're not going to be reading the floor rapidly. They're not used to these decisions on volume. They're not always going to make the right decision. Sometimes they turn it over. The Raptors reap the rewards of that. They head out the other end. These things, they stack on top of each other. It was effective defense. And Koloko at the back end, this was the most minutes he's played, I think. 31. He was sublime. Good for him, man. The bench guys, so Precious, I think in this game, the Fredless stuff hurt because Fred was carrying in this game to be certain. Precious, I think there was 4, he didn't get the turnover on every single one, but, 2 of them, one was a steal, one resulted in a block. He didn't shoot well from the floor in this one, and that's probably what most people were looking at, is that he struggled offensively, and most people did without Fred out there, but perhaps I'm doing too much lifting on his behalf. Achua needs to be better offensively. He struggled a little bit this year. His defense, though, I didn't mind whatsoever. There's a reason that he was effective defensively when he was on the floor. Some of this defense stuff is just 3-point variance, like it wasn't like better shots were seen. It was that sometimes the Bulls hit them, sometimes they didn't, because the Raptors were surrendering the same types of shots. They were there. It's just, we saw in the third quarter, for example, 33 points in that third quarter. Why? Because some of those shots dropped in. Vooch, when the ball, it's the trap. They run through, Caruso gets it, let's say, passes it out to the corner. Vooch starts floating back into the play. The Raptors are in full rotation, whirling dervish trying to catch up to everything. The ball goes to the corner, comes from the corner above the break. The guy above the break collapses the defense again. At that point, the Raptors are basically 5 guys in the paint, ready to shoot out and contest wherever. An advantaged contest for the offense, right? The ball goes to Vooch. He hits a 3. Is that the case on every single possession? Yeah, I mean, they could get that shot if they wanted to. The Bulls could take that shot for certain, but it just wasn't the case that they hit it all game. Caruso 0 for 6 from 3 in this one. Some of those possessions they swung to him and he missed all of them. If you're on the court for that variance, then like it's nice that you're there. That's the plus minus aspect. But guys like Koloko had no time he had a really great plus minus, but he had no time to allow variance into his life. Guys challenged him at the rim and he won. And Precious, for example, he was challenged off the dribble and he held up against, Audasumu tried to take him off the bounce, blocked at the rim. DeMar DeRozan, he tried to take him off the bounce coming off a screen. Precious sticks with him. DeRozan tried to muscle him, lost the ball. And there were a couple other plays that were made. And Gary Trent Jr., just a tough game for him. Like I'm just trying to, carry some water for the guys who had tough games, trying to be like, hey, this is why it was tough. Gary, just asked to do a lot offensively from jump. That was tough for Gary because the video I did for Yahoo Sports is basically saying how Gary has been tethered to Siakam's stardom to start this year. He's been really dependent on Siakam's creation for himself as a shooter because he hasn't really popped off as that pull-up isolation threat, which he did in lower volume but meaningful volume last season. He hasn't had that big stretch where he's kind of going off his own dribble and hitting everything this year. That didn't happen in this game. Guys like Audasumu and Caruso are really, really aggressive at the point of attack. Trent couldn't get by people and needed screens to kind of slip into space and mostly played off ball. So he wasn't able to create anything meaningful off the bounce in this game. And that's, them's the breaks. It was like a couple transition shots. Maybe the ball falls into his hands as a shooter in the half court, but he was affected by the defense in this game, and his defense lagged behind, which is why we saw Otto Porter actually step in and close out this game in Gary's place. Boucher and Thad, I thought were both great. 14 rebounds and 12 points between the two of them, 3 assists. These guys, Boucher, no matter what, he comes in, he gives you not necessarily positive as in you win the minutes, which is usually the case, but positive minutes in that he's doing good things on the floor. His defense, that core coverage, he's really gotten so good at working within the inside the Raptors defense, knowing where he's supposed to be, when people need help, when to cheat to that help, and when to recover and all that kind of stuff. He's been fantastic, and his motor offensively it just goes and goes and goes and goes. He didn't have a great three-point shooting game in this one. Sometimes he will, sometimes he won't, but he's always going to challenge the offensive glass. He's always going to cut, and he's always going to give you a little bit in putbacks and stuff like that. So that was really, really nice to see as well. Really great stuff from Boucher and Thad, just fitting in next to the good players, really, making some of that connective passing, getting on the offensive glass a little bit, and being a really smart mover defensively. That was awesome, really awesome to see. The Reggie M's award in this one, I think I'll probably have to give it to I'll give it to Thad. Sure, he comes in 14 minutes, 15 minutes, grabs 8 boards, kinda mucking around in there, a nice defensive stretch for him. I like that. I'll give it to Thad for this one. The top quick reaction comment is from Joseph Rome, in brackets, staff. Hmm. Quote, Raptors had 103 field goal attempts to the Bulls 88 and 7 more free throws. With Pascal out and efficiency in the half court reduced, we're going to have to keep winning the extra possessions game over a weak schedule this next 2 weeks. End quote. That is absolutely correct. This is how the Raptors won at the start of last year without Pascal. And by the way, not mentioned in this is that Fred was incredible. It the Raptors they can win the possession battle and still lose games if they don't have a guy like Fred. That 30 and 11 was absolutely massive. He was tremendous. And Scotty deserves credit, of course, too, because he worked at it all game, trying to be a primary, trying to create for others. And it was not easy. And the advantages did not come to him inherently. He often found things late in the shot clock. The primaries, like the first actions they ran, did not work for him. He worked for it all game. I expect it to get better, but he's still significantly more limited than guys like Pascal and Fred when it comes to initiating offense. It's really hard to do that at a high level at the NBA. And this is all despite Scotty having a tremendous start to the year as a connective player and as a guy who's inserting as an initiator every once in a while. But this is something that we're seeing. He's going to take his lumps and come out better for it. And we saw him figure it out for stretches in this game. But yeah, 103 to 88, that doesn't matter if Fred doesn't play the way that he did. So it's Fred, it's all-star Fred plus possession battle. Those are the things that are going to win this stretch. And OG, I mean, I already talked about OG in this one. Geez, OG tremendous offense. Like I talked about over the top, but just yeah, the offense is great. He's plugging in where he's needed, and he's also supplementing his offensive numbers by just being a guy who gets out on the break in transition. So he's not even asking for that half court stuff. And the half court stuff has been, the creation stuff didn't go overly well today, but he found enough of his own offense that I think everybody should be happy with it as well. But the the recipe for the most part is the Raptors really leaning into that identity, win the possession battle, of course, as you say, Joseph, but also Fred. Got to be all-star on top of that. And he was for this game. Hopefully he will be tomorrow night in Chicago. I will be here for you after that game as well. Yeah, keep listening. Thanks for tuning in. Whether you got into this in the morning or at night, have a blessed day and goodbye.